are full of energy this morning. I like that. We started a new series of Sunday school lessons from the book of Ezekiel and then later the book of Daniel. And when I was studying in Ezekiel, I found a couple of places where he mentions the windows of heaven. And it just reminded me of this old song, so I'm going to sing this for you this morning. Heaven's windows were open, all of glory could see. The crowd slowly gathering at Mount Calvary. Father, please stop them. The angels did cry, but as Jesus was dying, they heard God reply, go close the windows and pull down the shades. I will look when it's over and the debt has been paid. I just can't bear to see what the world's gonna do. Go close the window till the soldiers are through. Heaven's windows flew open with each cry from the cross. When God turned away, it seemed all was lost. What a glorious victory was won on that day, as Jesus was dying. They all heard God say, go close the window and pull down the shades. I will look when it's over and the debt has been paid. I just can't bear to see what the world's gonna do. Go close the window till the soldiers are through. I just can't bear to see what the world's gonna do. Go close the window till the soldiers are through.
No, Jimmy, I don't want you to introduce me, no. There have been a few jokes over the years over that, haven't there? And we're not going to repeat any of those jokes either, are we? Josh and Sarah, do y'all want to come up here this morning? The last time I had this suit on and had this many people in front of me, you know what we were doing? We were having a wedding. You sure you don't want to just go ahead and take care of it now? Okay. It'll be short and sweet like the other one was. Oh, good morning, everybody. Wow. Pretty good crowd this morning. Hopefully, you guys won't hate me after the day's over. Because this is something that's been on my mind for about a month now, since Brother Todd asked me if I'd fill in for him this morning. And I'll just be honest with you. This hit me as hard as it could hit anybody. So if you get mad at me for what comes out of my mouth this morning, just keep in the back of your mind that I got mad at myself over the words, and then I realized I really needed to hear it. So just keep that in the back of your mind when we start talking about this. Hypocrites. Everybody's heading for the back door now, aren't they? Wow, hypocrites. Hypocrisy, hypocritical, being hypocritical. Who has ever heard the statement, well, they're all just a bunch of hypocrites? The church is full of hypocrites. Who has ever said that? The church is full of hypocrites. Are they right when they say that? Yes, I hear a bunch of yeses. Good, because I was afraid I was going to be the only yes. The church is full of a bunch of hypocrites. How can we say that? We are the church, right? We're here this morning. If the church is full of a bunch of hypocrites, what does that make us? Hypocrites, doesn't it? Wow. You know, I was thinking about that word and about this whole topic. And I thought, I can't believe I ever would have called myself a hypocrite. But, excuse me for the improper grammar, but I are one. There have been too many times that I have said something one way, and when I had to act on something, I did it the other way. In other words, I said I was going to do something this way, and I did it the other way. What is a hypocrite? If that's not what a hypocrite really is. And unfortunately, that statement of the church is full of hypocrites, unfortunately that is true. But we're going to look at that today, and hopefully we can make a choice, make a decision to change that. I want to change that in me, and hopefully you want to change that in you, and change that in the church when we do that. But let's think about it. What's the definition of a hypocrite? And I looked this up in 2 or 3 different dictionaries. Listen to what Webster's dictionary had to say. A hypocrite is a person who claims or pretends to have certain beliefs about what is right, but who behaves in a way that disagrees with those beliefs. And it's awfully wordy, but pretty good definition, isn't it? Another definition, a person who puts on a false appearance of virtue or religion. Wow. I have a feeling that's probably what those people that have said that about the church, being full of hypocrites, I have a feeling that's the definition they're using. That's the thoughts that are going through their mind. That the people that are going through or into the church building are putting on a false appearance of virtue, a false appearance of religion. One other definition, a person who acts in contradiction to his or her stated beliefs or feelings. All 3 of those things basically say the same thing. All of them say the same thing. They all say that we are a bunch of hypocrites. And a hypocrite is somebody that says one thing and does another. But you know, this is nothing new. The church was even full of hypocrites in Jesus' day. And in fact, in one translation of the Bible, the word hypocrite, or a form of the word hypocrite, either hypocritical or hypocrisy, can be found more than 40 times in the Bible. You can find it in the book of Job. You can find it in Psalm. Found it in Isaiah. And you can find it throughout the New Testament. And we're going to look at a few examples in Matthew here in just a few minutes. But in Matthew chapter 23, from verses 13 through 29, we see that Jesus himself uses the word hypocrite 6 different times. And that is where we're going to be this morning. So if you want to go ahead and turn there, turn to Matthew chapter 23. And we see, starting in verse 13, but going into 15, into 23, and into 25, and 27, and 29, we see basically the same statement every time. Jesus says, "But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites." Why do you think Jesus said that so many times? Why did he have to say it 6 times? Why did he have to say, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites"? Well, let's look at it a little closer. Look closely at who he calls a hypocrite. He's talking to the scribes and Pharisees, isn't he? Who are the scribes and Pharisees in this day? In the time when Jesus was on this earth, the scribes and Pharisees were the religious leaders. They were the ones with the educations. They were the ones that read the Scriptures, that studied the Scriptures, and would try, unfortunately, to the best of their ability, they would try to explain the Scriptures to the people. Sad thing about it is they did what we do, unfortunately, too many times today. They interjected themselves into the Scriptures and what they wanted into the Scriptures way too much. And we'll see that here in just a little bit. But we'll see, Jesus calls them hypocrites 6 times. And he calls the scribes and Pharisees hypocrites 6 times. Jesus was calling the religious leaders hypocrites. Now, don't be thinking in your mind, don't be running through, okay, yeah, I remember that leader, that pastor, that deacon, yeah, they were a hypocrite. Possibly they were. But what I want you to do today is don't think of anybody else, think of yourself. Don't think of anybody else you've ever come in contact with, anybody else that you've ever run into, anybody else that you've ever even had any kind of relationship with. Think about yourself. Because in order for us to change this thought, in order for us to change the way people feel, think about the church and think about us, we've got to change ourselves first, don't we? We can't change the church without changing ourselves. Because why? Because we are the church. Yeah, we reference this building as the church building. But who's the church? Where's the church? We are the church. Believers in Christ are the church. So when somebody says the church is full of a bunch of hypocrites, that ought to really hit home and ought to wake us up and make us realize that person just called me a hypocrite. And then it ought to make me open my eyes to the fact that, you know what? Maybe I am one. And I'll be the first to admit, there have been way too many times that I am one. Okay? Well, let's look there in verse 13. Matthew chapter 23, verse 13. "But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. For you neither enter yourselves, nor allow those who would enter to go in." What's Jesus saying right here? He said, you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You will not enter basically, he's telling them, listen, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven, and you're going to make it so other people are not going to get into heaven. What kind of a person is that? Do we have those people today? Are we that type of person today? Are we so set in our ways, so set in our structure that we won't allow God to work? Are we so set in what we used to do or what we've always done that we won't let God work the way He wants to work, and the way He's going to work, whether we like it or not? Well, let's go on. Look at verse 15. Verse 15 says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves." What did Jesus say right here? He said, you're hypocrites. He said, you convert people away from God to be like yourselves. Do we do that today? Do we do that in church today? Either y'all have decided to take a nap or you're scared to answer. Do we do that today? We do, don't we? We want people that come through those doors to be just like us. Too bad we didn't want those people that come through those doors to be just like Jesus. Why do we want them to be just like us? You ever thought about that? Why do we want the outside world to come in here and to conform to the way we do things? Why do we want that? Because we think it's the right way to do it? Or because we're comfortable with that? Just a thought. Let's go on. Look at verse 16. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by this temple, it is nothing, but if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. Look at this next statement. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing, but if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. What's Jesus saying here? There in verse 16 he says, woe to you, blind guides. In 16 through 22, Jesus is saying, you're blindly leading God's people to follow man-made traditions instead of God's Word. And that one really hit home to me. And I've had several compliments on my suit. I'm sorry, Chad, I keep looking down right into the microphone. But I've had several compliments on my suit this morning. No, Jimmy, I'm not bringing that up. But let me ask this. Why did I put this suit on this morning? Normally, if I'm not up here preaching, do I wear a suit? No. Do I, unless it's a wedding, funeral, or preaching, do I ever even think about wearing a suit? Maybe like to go to Walmart or go to work? Why, no. Why did I put this suit on? I'm sorry? It is in reverence, yeah. But does the Bible tell me that I've got to wear a suit when I stand up and preach? It doesn't, does it? Yeah, God tells us that we need to give Him our best. And if a suit is my best, then the suit is what I need to have on. But hopefully we'll see when we look through everything that we're going to talk about today that God's more concerned about our inner being than He is our outward appearance. Unfortunately, we are more concerned about our outward appearance sometimes than we are our inner appearance. Well, let's go on. Verse 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. And right there we can think, yep, I can point my finger at me. Or you can point your finger at possibly you. What's Jesus saying here in these verses? You know, when I read through that, I thought, He's telling us that sometimes we get caught up in the little stuff, in every minute detail. We involve ourselves in every last little detail, and we ignore what's really important. And that's justice and mercy and faithfulness. Why do we get caught up in the little details? Why do we get caught up in every little thing? You know, everything's got to be perfect, and I love it when everything's perfect. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But why do we get caught up in that? There again, for me, it goes back to, well, that's the way it's always been. That's kind of the way I like it, so, you know, I don't want to change anything because I like it that way. Look at verse 25. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, that the outside also may be clean. Jesus is saying, telling the Pharisees at this time, but telling us today too, that we're more concerned about what suit we've got on. We're more concerned about what pants, what shoes, making sure my one hair up here on top, my little island, as some of the youth used to say, is all in place. We're more concerned about that than we are about our spiritual life, our spiritual health. We're more concerned about our appearance or anybody else's appearance. What if somebody walked through the door right now, just dirty, grungy, covered in filth, covered in anything, covered in tattoos all over from head to toe, like the Birdman, if anybody watches NBA, or covered in piercings, like Dennis Rodman, if you remember back that far. But what if somebody walked in today that looked like that? What would we do? How would we act? How would we respond? I'm going to give you an example of how I have in the past. I see somebody like that. Yeah, I'll go shake their hand, but, they probably don't want to talk to me. They probably don't want to, they're not interested in me. They don't need me. They've got some other people that will come talk to them. So when that's happened to me in the past, when I've seen people like that, I've kind of shunned away from them. I've kind of walked away. But what if God sent somebody like that right this very instant, right through those doors? How would we respond? Would we truly respond in love, caring for them, because they are one of God's creation? You have to wonder, if we respond the way I have in the past and kind of shunned them, you have to wonder, hey, maybe that's why they have the idea, have the thought that the church is full of hypocrites. You never can tell. Well, let's go on. Verse 27. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. We like to act spiritual, don't we? Go ahead, we can admit it. I'll admit it. How's that? I like to act spiritual. It makes me feel good to think that, hey, I may have followed God the way I was supposed to have done. And I can put on a good front. And I had a conversation with a guy just the other night. We talked about something similar to this. About us putting on a good front, we can hide a bunch of stuff. But it's all an appearance. It's all show. When we're really hurting, we're really broken, we're really torn up inside. And see, God is more concerned about our inside than He is our outside. What if the church were more concerned about the inside rather than the outside? What if we as the church were more concerned about spiritual concerns of each other, spiritual health, because a lot of people are hurting. What if we were more concerned about our spiritual health and other spiritual health than we were about what they looked like, what they wore, and how they acted? What would that look like? I think it would be pretty awesome. It would be a fairly nice-looking group of people. It would be a great church. Well, let's go on. Verse 29. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the days of our father, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you witness against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up, then, the measure of your fathers. You serpents, you brood of vipers, how are you to escape being sentenced to hell? What is Jesus saying right here? He was saying, sometimes we pretend that we have learned from our past. We pretend to learn from others in the past. But do we really learn anything? We could apply that to the world, but let's stick with us today. Let's stick with us personally today. Do we learn from our mistakes? I would like to think that I do, but more times than not, I don't. Somebody walked through those doors right now, using the same example I used just a minute ago. Somebody walked through those doors right now, dingy dirty, just what I would look at and say just a mess. Am I going to treat them any differently? Or are you going to treat them any differently? Because remember, they are a child of God. Okay? You might step back and say, wait a minute. What you just read was spoken 2,000 years ago. Jesus said this a little over 2,000 years ago. It's not relevant today, is it? Yeah. It actually is relevant today. Hopefully you guys realize that. It is relevant today. But there again, look at who he was saying this to. He was talking to the scribes and Pharisees. Look what he said to them there in chapter 23. He called the scribes and Pharisees hypocrites. But you know what's so amazing about this? When I was reading through this and studying through this, what was so amazing about this, if you look back in the chapter before that, chapter 22, there in verse 36, you'll see that a Pharisee, a lawyer, tried to test Jesus. He looked to him there in chapter 22, verse 36. The Pharisee, the lawyer, said, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" See, this lawyer was trying to trick Jesus, was trying to trap Jesus. He asked Jesus, "Which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Just right before Jesus calls the scribes and Pharisees, the religious leaders, just right before he calls them hypocrites, he told them what they should be doing. He told them that they should be loving God and loving others. After Jesus said that, then he goes in and he tells the scribes and Pharisees, "Woe to you, hypocrites." Do you think it made sense to them at that point? Obviously not, because they crucified him. Does it make sense to us today? Obviously not, because we get stuck in the same rut, don't we? Let's look at one other set of verses, set of scriptures. Over in Romans chapter 13. I thought this was kind of funny, but when I was studying through this, I read these verses, these three verses, Romans chapter 13, starting in verse 8. And when I read it, it was like a light went off in my head. I thought, aha. Look what Romans chapter 13, verse 8 says. "Owe no one anything except to love each other. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law." Let's think back for just a minute now. When Jesus was getting on to the scribes and Pharisees, he was telling them, scribes and Pharisees, you're hypocrites because you're doing all these things when you really should be loving people. I'm sure the scribes and Pharisees in their mind, they were thinking, yes, but we've kept the law. Yes, but we've held up the law. We've made the law this great thing. And here in Romans chapter 13, we see Jesus said if we'll just love each other, we're fulfilling the law. What does he say there in verse 8? "Owe no one anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law." By loving each other, we fulfill God's law. And then he goes on to explain a little bit more in depth. Verse 9, "For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Kind be kind of hard to take if Jesus is standing right there in front of you and telling you this at that time, wouldn't it? But is Jesus not telling us this today as well? Is Jesus not saying, you know, let me back up. I'm not pointing fingers today. Jesus tells me all the time. I'm going to use me as an example. Jesus tells me all the time, quit looking at other people badly. Quit thinking bad things about them. Cleanse yourself, purify yourself, and then love on those people. Do we do that? Do we really love each other? Do we really love one another? If we did, would people say the church is full of hypocrites? If the church as a whole, or let's make it more personal, if I as an individual and you as an individual followed what Jesus said there in Matthew chapter 22, love God and love others, could anybody ever call me a hypocrite, or could anybody ever call you a hypocrite again? If we loved God and loved others, could they call us hypocrites any longer? No. If we truly loved God and loved others, the world could not call the church hypocrites, a bunch of hypocrites, any longer. So what are we going to do about it? Like I said from the beginning, it's not one of those things that the church has got to change. Church needs to change. Church is not going to change until we change. So, do we? Do we really and truly love God and love others? If not, don't you think it's about time we changed? Does anybody, when I asked the question to begin with, at the very start of this, I asked the question if anybody had ever heard that phrase, you know, the church is full of a bunch of hypocrites, or just a bunch of hypocrites. Nearly everybody raised their hand and said, yep, I've heard it. And a lot of us could say, yep, we've said it. What if we started loving God and loving others? Could they say the same? Could we say the same thing today if we truly did that? I don't know about you, but I don't like it when people call me names. But I really don't like it when people call me a hypocrite, and I know it's true. Let's pray. Father, as we come to you this morning,